Striking up a killer tune with those cards that you're going to want for this new archetype. Make sure you guys smash the living crap out of that killer tune button so you guys don't miss out more on the Jet Synchron to start things off over here. What says, hey, I like a Synchro archetype, then a classic like Jet Synchron that has the ability to revive itself, acting as a level 1, giving you some of that extra gas to be able to kind of combo up with things. And honestly, I thought Jet Synchron would be kind of the poster child of this archetype for things that you want, because it's a body that revives itself. It gives you access to, you know, some of those interesting different numbers this archetype had. Also, you know, depending on how the package goes that you want to develop, you definitely got some things to really look at and consider with this card. So you're mainly looking at this for the recurability and helping you get to those offset numbers, which I think is going to be really, really strong. Then we have Duelist Genesis. Now, Duelist Genesis, not the set, the spell card, that says if you have a tuner on your field or in your graveyard, you get to add any of the Synchro spell and trap cards from your deck to your hand. If you know how vast having an option like this is, it's quite good. Now, my only downside to this card is it's going to force you to either get a tuner into the graveyard, or it's going to force you to already have a tuner on the field. Now, the entire Killer Tune archetype is nothing but, you know, being able to use tuner monsters to be able to, you know, get to those other tuner monsters. So I actually think that that's a solid victory in what you could do, but anything that you need in the Synchro archetype, spells and traps. There are a lot of very powerful ones that you can work with, and also it's not stopping Konami from making more. Like, we can print more of these support cards, which leads me into Synchro Overtake. Now, probably one of the most predominant cards that you're going to really want to consider with this archetype is the fact that Synchro Overtake, and the fact that they actually specifically named cards on these new cards is actually, I think, the thing that kind of helped this archetype along. Because we talk about, usually when we're naming certain themes, that certain cards somewhere along the way end up being hurt. But no, when you name specific cards, you can actually hit any of the key archetypal points that you're going to need. And that actually works in our favor here. Because anything that we need, any of the main deck monsters, they are all specifically named on the two big synchros, which really, really helps us out. So I think Synchro Overtake is by far one of the cooler options that you've got going for you when you're looking at just the toolbox options. And then we got Mannadium. Now, I know I'm a little bit coping on Mannadium, because next to Gothams, Mannadium's the only other real deck that's able to kind of use those, you know, tuner monsters to be able to synchro. I mean, it's the Gothams problem all over again. We live in a situation where, you know, being able to go down different things. Also, Triskaluda being able to do some level modifying could potentially work in your favor, depending on the build and the inclusion of the different things you got to go into. You got to remember that there are some locks that you are going to kind of have to navigate when you're playing this deck, but I don't think that those locks are necessarily impossible locks. They're just little inconveniences that you're going to kind of have to figure out along the way to go with. Then I have the Sea Monster of Theseus. So in case Killer Tune ever gets out of hand, this is a consideration piece that Super Polymerization is able to absolutely and single-handedly obliterate this deck, because I think Konami's done a good job at looking at these archetypes and like, if this archetype ever becomes too much of a problem, there's a super poly target in the back that we can actually toss out and be able to just do something with. And once again, see, the best monster of 2017 finally getting a chance out here to be able to be worked with, which is such a spectacular and hilarious thing to be seeing. Like, You can't make this stuff up, everybody. It puts a smile on my face knowing that my boy Monster of Theseus is finally getting some playtime. And then we have the Earthbound Prisoner Stone Sweeper. You know, there's a couple... The fact that, one, you can beam this out is a big fatty, but you can also add a Fiend Tuner off of this. Now, it's really interesting to me that Konami is literally looking at this card and saying, hey, we can do cool things with this. This is one of the cards that they're actually going to include in this set. I think Stone Sweeper ends up being pretty much a mandatory piece in this deck, actually. Because if you're toggling into the level 3, you basically are able to get into the full combo line. And, I mean, also, you can pretty much get any of the pieces that you need with this. I guess it also brings up, should we play Red Dragon support in this? But that's a question for the generic side of this. If you're really, trying to figure out what tools and options that are best going to work there. And then we have Starlight Junction. Now, for those of you that have forgotten about this card, this is another field spell that you can play. It says you contribute a tuner monster to special summon a Synchron monster from your deck with a different level from the monster that had on the field. And during your opponent's turn, if you special summon a Synchro monster from your extra deck, you can target one card on the field and shuffle it into the deck. Now, you can only use each effect of Starlight Junction once per turn. So this actually gives us some interesting takeaways. This gives us a ability to rotate into a different tuner that is a Synchron, which does kind of bridge the gap into using some Synchron stuff. And then depending on how this goes, we can also use this as a form of interruption against the opponent if we are making a Synchro monster during the opponent's turn, which we more than likely will be. So Starlight Junction turns into a very interesting card. And then for the meme, I tossed Limit Overdrive on here. You guys probably don't remember this card either. But Limit Overdrive says return a tuner Synchro and a non-tuner Synchro you control to the extra deck to special summon a Synchro monster from your extra deck that has a level equal to the combined levels of the two monsters that were on the field, ignoring its summoning conditions. Now, you can only activate one Limit Overdrive per turn. Now, this card is extremely old at this point in time. I found this card looking at kind of the tools and options you have. Maybe this card is not something that you want to look at in the deck, but this is looking at the cool killer tune options that we've got going for us. So I do kind of wonder in the back of my mind if there is a possibility that something really cool with Limit Overdrive could actually come out, and maybe you could cheese into a really broken Synchro. Who knows? This leads me to the junk Synchron thing. The power of Fellow Structure Deck and all of the junk support that was in there really kind of begs the question of, can we incorporate this into Killer Tail? Is there a medium to be able to do this? And that's kind of where, I pointed to, Starlight Junction earlier. Depending on, how things kind of set up, yeah, you might be able to find what would be that optimal build to get you to, the piece that you're really looking for. I don't know how or what ratios that you would want to adjust to make that the best build, or to even, bring those junk cards together with Killer Tune. But all of these Synchro options that you have are a lot of cool things that you need to kind of consider. Especially, just not being limited to the junk, which brings us to the generic stuff. You got Red Dragon, you've got the rest of the Yusei Fudo stuff. Yes, Killer Tune does lock you for the rest of the turn on when you're done with those pieces, which can make for some kind of awkward situations, but you've got little interactions that might be able to bridge the gap and maybe change the trajectory of these things and maybe build these into the Synchro Pop. I don't know how the build is going to shape up right now, but I think you've got a lot of cool things going for you, and I think you're going to want to watch those. So what do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.